This is Speaking of Pets podcast, where we offer you up-to-date, science-based, accurate information.
Oh, Gizmo! Good kitty. You're such a good kitty.
And they're looking up and howling in unison.
If it affects pets, we'll talk about it. Speaking of Pets podcast is sponsored by Vetramax Solvacare Gel, the industry-leading treatment for idiopathic hyperkeratosis. Available from your vet or visit Chewy.com and save 15% with promo code VetramaX15 at checkout. Vetramax makes it better. And Blue Buffalo Veterinary Diets. Love them like family, feed them like family. Hey everyone, welcome to Speaking of Pets. I'm Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroman, a board-certified veterinary dermatologist, and
I'm Janet Novotny-King. I'm the doctor's sister. I am nowhere medically related at all or informed. I'm just here to kind of have our, to simplify what the doctor's saying so that the general public understands. And I'm a pet lover.
That's right, and rescuer. Janet.
Yes.
I know you don't know anything about the bird flu. And I'm ignorant about bird flu too.
Right.
So I went right to the expert. We've got Dr. Angela Demaree, who is a veterinarian. She got her DVM degree from Purdue, yay, and her Master of Public Health in biostatistics and epidemiology, which, what would Daddy say?
Smart cookie.
Smart cookie. From the University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine. She has her own podcast, Beyond the Stethoscope. We have to ask her about that.
Yeah, we need some makeup help.
We need tips. But anyway, she recently retired. I am so impressed by this. As a major in the United States Army Reserve, thank you for your service. And she's had a diverse career. Again, we meet the most interesting people in companion animal medicine, equine sports medicine, regulatory medicine, politics and policy, which is why I invited her on today, because she's the president of the American Association of Food Safety and Public Health Veterinarians, and she is our go-to person for the 411 on this bird flu, which can affect our pets.
Right.
It's killed over 125 million, ducks, geese, and birds. So, Dr. Angela, we are so thankful for you taking the time to spend with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. You know, I think the general public thinks it's all about egg prices. And it's so much more than that, right? Because that's what's affecting everyone's pocketbook. So I guess, can we start with first of all, what's influenza?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's a virus, right?
Yep.
And so we do recommend, or I should say the CDC recommends every year that people are vaccinated annually for the influenza or the flu virus. And bird flu is a different kind of virus. And our current vaccines for humans, it will not protect us against bird flu. I know that's a common question that people often ask. So thought maybe I'd start there. But it is, a virus that is out in the wild bird population.
So is it in like the robins and the blue jays that are hanging out in my yard? Are they carrying it around?
Well, so what's great about answering that question, because things are always changing, is that the USDA does actually have an online website and resource. Oh. So I think if you Google something like USDA, which is the U.S. Department of Agriculture, HPAI for highly pathogenic avian influenza, there is a resource in wild birds, and I've sent you the link so you can share that with your listeners as well. But it actually goes county by county, state by state. So most recently in 2025, we've seen, for example, in the state of Illinois, there has been a strain found in the Canadian goose. And in New York, there's been one in the great horned owl. As well as a goose. And then in Washington State, they did find one in a house sparrow. So the USDA is definitely tracking and confirming these potential cases of bird flu in the wild bird population. So that's really where I would send your listeners for the most up-to-date information.
So how, as a pet owner, I have 2 cats and a dog, how would they contract it, and what do I look for?
Sure. Most commonly, We've seen some cases in our domestic cats, in our house cats, and it's actually been from feeding a raw diet. So when your veterinarian says do not feed raw diets to your pets, not only can they contract diarrheal diseases such as Campylobacter and Salmonella just like we can, but also now we know there's a risk for avian influenza as well. Some of the clinical signs are what you'd expect them to be: respiratory distress, hard time breathing, maybe they're congested sounding, but also neurologic signs are pretty common in these cases that have been confirmed.
So I have a question. What is a raw diet for pets?
Oh.
Well,
I gotta ask because mine eat kibble, right? So I've never.
That is actually a good question. I mean, Angela, really.
Is it canned food? Is that a raw
I mean,
diet?
I'm actually taken aback by that question because that is a very good question. Thank you.
Well, wait, because you hear raw milk. Is raw milk unpasteurized milk?
Well, that's bad
Yes.
too.
Well, I don't know what a raw
That's
food
right.
diet is. I know for humans, I guess it would be like vegetables and fruits, raw, uncooked. But what is it for pets?
Janet, remember, Uncle Artie's wife, Aunt Helen, used to put raw liver with parsley in the blender and drink it? That's raw diet.
That's disgusting.
Well, I'm going to let Angela answer, but think that's raw diet at its worst.
Oh. Look, I can't do carrot juice because our mother forced us to drink carrot juice. I cannot stand it.
Okay.
That's
Now, all about you.
Yeah,
now.
all about me. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is a raw pet food diet?
No, these are really great questions. So when you're talking about kibble that you would get in the pet store, or canned cat food, dog food, those have been put through a cooking step. So because of that cooking step, before it got put into a bag, before it got put into a can and put on the pet store shelf, it is no longer raw. So raw diet would be raw meat that is either freeze-dried, frozen, or refrigerated at the pet store, for example.
Like literally raw.
Literally raw with no kill step. So since this outbreak, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has actually put out, I can actually read it so I get the information right, but basically put out a directive that these raw pet food companies must take highly pathogenic avian influenza into account when formulating these diets. So they must use that in their critical control point hazard analysis, making sure they're not passing along anything that could make a pet sick. So they do require companies to do that work to make sure that the food they're putting on the pet food shelves is safe. Now, the FDA said they could do it in one of two ways as of yesterday when I looked at the resource. One would be to put in that kill step. We know that avian influenza is actually deactivated through cooking, through heat. So if they make the food hot enough, it may not be fully cooked,
right?
Hence maybe getting some of that raw labeling, but it may be sufficient to kill any flu virus that is in that product. The other option would be to ensure that the point of origin of these raw meats did not come from a farm that had been had a case of avian influenza, but then also not only that farm, but going through the processing plant, that processing plant could not have processed anything that had an avian influenza case, either in beef cow, or, so you start thinking of all the animals that we're seeing, avian influenza in, and kind of how that supply chain can be impacted in all these different areas. So that's why I'm recommending against raw diets currently for my cat clients.
Sure.
And what's interesting about that is when I was, Angela, I help out the Golden Retriever Rescue group down here, and I was talking to one of the golden owners, and she was asking me about her cat, and I mentioned it. I said, whatever you do, I wouldn't be feeding a raw diet right now. No one is aware of this.
Right.
I mean, the public awareness of it is really lacking. And I find it interesting that as an epidemiologist, Angela, how you guys first found like a sick cat or the number of geese or ducks that were affected, and how you guys traced it back that it's this strain of bird flu. I find that fascinating.
Well, so first off, I was not the epidemiologist on these processes.
You should have
So
been.
just to,
You should have been.
but generally how it works would be
Yeah.
that we know that we're seeing avian influenza in the environment, right? So there's some knowledge by the veterinarian and public health professionals that and your local boards of animal health, state veterinarian, there's some knowledge that we are seeing these cases in wild bird populations or on farm or other places. So there's that knowledge base that is out there. Then we end up with the practitioners that are out there doing the work, and they're seeing these cases and it's not responding to the usual treatment. And so they're taking samples, and the viruses and bacteria that typically would cause respiratory disease in cats, for example, it's testing negative to. And then they might pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm seeing this disease, to their local state veterinarian, and say, what else could it be? Is there anything else I should be looking for? So, these are typically or sometimes the way they unfold. I don't actually know how it unfolded specifically in these cases. I think, there were some wild cat populations, captive,
Right.
wild cat populations that sustained some deaths. They probably did some necropsies, tested for a wide variety of things, and sometimes we find it that way too, unfortunately.
I just find that fascinating because remember when we would be on our large animal ambulatory routes in vet school, and you'd go to the dairy farm and there's all these feral cats hanging around, and it's interesting to me that it's not like someone's pet cat. So if they find the cat that died, like, would they call the vet and say, hey, come out here and autopsy, necropsy this cat because it might be some rare flu? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wonder if it was around longer than we even knew.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's always the question. I will say, when it comes to farmers, they're pretty astute when it could be something that impacts their other animals. And so
Right.
they might be actually more likely to have that veterinarian or take that animal to the local veterinary hospital and to the disease and diagnostic laboratories and say, hey, I want to make sure this isn't a risk to my livestock because that's their
Right.
livelihood.
Like if it affects milk production, which
Right.
actually, I when I was reading about it, I think that was kind of one of the symptoms. They found that the milk production was off, and I also read, and correct me on this, Angela, that it really likes to live. The virus kind of likes to live around the mammary glands in the dairy cattle.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar in dairy cattle as I am with cats, so I'm gonna turf that one to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Sure.
the large animal guys and girls.
Yes, I used to be in a former life, but now I'm feline predominant, so I want to make sure I don't misspeak on that one.
Hey, did you know that Blue Buffalo makes prescription diets that are formulated by animal nutritionists and veterinarians? And they're used for dietary needs such as kidney support, gastrointestinal support, weight management, and our favorite, allergy and skin problems.
They make a food allergic diet that's an alligator-based called NP or a hydrolyzed salmon-based for dogs and cats called HF.
So please, ask your veterinarian about Blue Buffalo prescription diets.
Now there's soothing relief for your pet's irritated skin from allergic response, contact allergens, and insect bites. Atopicreme HC by Vetramax is a unique anti-inflammatory, rehydrating leave-on lotion conditioner for animals that is quickly absorbed, providing sustained benefits while leaving no residue. Fortified with ceramides, these lipids help restore the skin's natural protective barrier and aid in healthy skin regeneration for your pet. Atopicreme HC is made in the USA and not only provides quick relief for irritated skin, but it's also an aid in detangling your animal's coat. Ask your distributor about Vetramax products. Vetramax makes it better.
So we should watch for changes, signs that are cat or dog is ill, is it more prevalent in cats than dogs?
I don't believe, and again, things are always changing, that we've seen a case in dogs yet. And in general, the risk of transmission to humans, to cats, to dogs, very low. The risk is very low. Now, I will say, back to your raw diet question, raw meats, like poultry in particular, that have been exposed to the avian influenza virus, raw colostrum products. I know those are a little bit popular right now in the pet food aisle.
Right.
And raw milk are three of the ways that they have seen or suspect that we could get transmission to cats, and then also in theory, I guess, dogs or people. Although again, the primary risk to people are those in close proximity to high viral loads. So unless you're an on-the-farm worker or you're in a veterinary clinic not wearing proper biosecurity, like a face mask, like remember those N95 masks from COVID, or
Right.
gowns, getting saliva in the eye, those particulate matter, respiratory droplets that contain the virus in your eye, things like that, and being in close quarters with high viral loads, unprotected. So again, the risk very low, but anytime there's that potential risk for human transmission, it's just important that we do put our masks on, we do put safety goggles on, that we are protecting both ourselves and the owners as well.
So there are people who live in suburban areas who brought in chickens, right? During
Right.
COVID so they could get eggs. Should they kind of be careful with their little flocks and their cute little coops?
I think, good biosecurity practices are really important. And what biosecurity practices means are that when you go off farm, don't go onto other people's farms with your same shoes. Make sure your shoes and pant legs and everything are cleaned and disinfected before interacting with your flock. Maybe keep an eye on the avian influenza statistic in wild birds that the USDA is putting out. And for those backyard flocks, anybody that is starting to see sudden death, respiratory signs, just to call out their state veterinarian and get some samples and make sure that things are being, diagnosed appropriately. Those would be the high level items. And again, if you go off to a farm and a petting zoo, and I know it's a little cold right now, but before we know it, the county fairs will be upon us again.
Yeah.
So if we're doing those kinds of things, clean your shoes before you go home. Leave the shoes in the garage. Don't immediately greet your cats and dogs without changing your clothes, washing your hands, those kinds of things. That way we're not transmitting really anything to our pets from somewhere else we may have been.
Hey, it's like the white nose thing with the bats. No, we're going to go in.
That's fungal.
But we were going to go in this cave thing, my husband and I, and the park ranger said, take a picture of what you have on, and you can never, ever wear it again in the cave because of this white nose syndrome. So it's kind of the same thing, to just be super careful. Interesting.
That is interesting.
I also thought when I was reading about this, or listening to it, actually, I should say, on a webinar on it, that it kind of followed the migratory bird route. Yeah. What did they say? Like Pacific Northwest, Central, and Mississippi areas. Because wasn't the first case written up from Oregon, if I remember right?
I don't know.
And then I thought, wow, you epidemiologists. I mean, you got to put it all together. It's like you take pieces of puzzles from everywhere, and that just amazes me. It's like when I got sick from Chipotle, I didn't call and tell anybody,
But you're supposed to.
I guess I was. But then, Angela, how many people do you believe? I mean, you would have people calling you every day saying, I don't feel good. How do you weed those out? And I know we're kind of off subject.
Well,
a
I
little
think
bit.
how it
It'd be
works,
hard.
but how it works here is our town has a director of public health. And
Okay.
now it's a she, would get all the reports from the local hospitals of the
Yeah.
residents who lived there.
Yeah.
Like, I'm bringing it back to me when I had pneumonia. He said, "Hey, you were on my pneumonia report." And I'm like, "Great, I'm famous."
Oh,
So
oh.
he
But I
knew.
didn't go to the hospital. You see
No,
what I'm saying?
oh, right. But if you had, that would have been reported back.
And also remember spreadsheets. We can, put all the data into different columns of a spreadsheet. And then if I can get really geeky, we can run regression analysis to see what are the common factors. Are there any correlations? There is some pretty fancy data software packages that I do believe a lot of state and county public health departments actually use to make that a little easier. So, it looks like you might be a line in a spreadsheet, but when we start looking at the bigger picture, if we get 20 reports and the question is, where did you eat? And it's the same restaurant, then they can start asking more questions, getting more information, reaching out to more people, and figuring out kind of where some of these diseases came from.
Does it actually whittle down to where you have to talk to some of these pet owners and say, okay, what are you feeding? Did they go out and catch a bird? Do they ever go out? That kind of thing.
Well, I do ask my cat owners that on a daily basis. And
Yes.
what are you feeding? Are
Yes.
we indoor, outdoor? Do we do these things? And, especially now when we're seeing respiratory signs, we definitely want to be asking a lot of these questions, counseling about raw diets, really making sure that people know the risk and also that we're not missing diseases as best we can.
So
Janet, I want to tell you one thing, Janet, about your question about raw diet. Some of these raw diet companies, and we're not here to bash raw diet, but they claim that some of them have enzymes that quote unquote kill the bacteria. Some of them have probiotics. I know the high pressure processing can kill viruses, if I'm not mistaken, Angela, but some of these other ways, I'm questioning.
what is high pressure? You mean like where they stick it in the tube? That's killing
Probably
stuff?
canning. I'm guessing you're talking about canning where, they put the material in the can and cook it to high temperatures. It may increase the pressure as well.
Yeah.
There may be other processes I'm less familiar with, just in, I guess, full transparency. But until, there's the research that says this is how we inactivate these viruses and we know it was there and then we did a kill step and then now it's not, it's very difficult to know all of those things. I do trust what the FDA put out. Part of my background, as you mentioned, was in the military. Military veterinarians, as you alluded to, veterinarians are responsible a lot of times for food safety and food defense in our country. So I've gotten, I guess, the privilege of going behind the scenes in a lot of human food manufacturing facilities and understanding what hazard analysis is, what critical control points are to help minimize any viral or bacterial transmission that can cause human illness. So there's a lot of procedures and processes that really do help to protect both animals and people during the pet food making process or the human food, packaging or repackaging or cooking processes that are out there. So
That's
can be
good to
very
know.
involved.
That's good to
So
know.
pasteurization, I mean, we should feel okay about drinking milk.
As long as it's been pasteurized. Yep.
Right.
Not the raw
100%.
milk.
Yeah, you just never know with the raw products.
Yeah.
And they haven't been pasteurized. Therefore, any bacteria that's there has not been inactivated or killed. So again, I can't say 100% of the time 100% of things are good or bad. We can only say these are the best practices as we currently understand them to ensure that when you eat food or drink milk or water even, that you're not getting sick from it.
I'm glad you brought up colostrum because I've seen commercials for that, about taking colostrum and how that can help your health. And, I didn't even think about that. But Janet, colostrum is the first thing that comes out after a cow has a baby.
Well, I know. I was
It's got
trying to think
all
like
the
how
antibodies.
humans would do that.
Well, they powder it. They I don't know if they freeze dry it. I don't know, like Angela said, I don't know what the process is.
Wow.
But it's out there for us to take with the idea that it's going to make us healthy in some way. But I would assume that you'd have to watch that as well. And Janet, we were raised on raw milk.
We were raised on raw milk. My mom would go to the farm and get it in glass bottles, and the best part was sucking that cream off the top.
The best part for me was seeing all the cats, the kittens at the farm. But we never had to eat that raw liver in the blender with the
Okay, stop. But we did have to eat carrot juice, which was disgusting.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, it just literally turns my stomach.
Well, and Janet, just to get off subject, Angela, I want to ask you about Tommy. Janet doesn't know about Tommy.
Who's Tommy?
Oh, well, I guess I should say the love of my life, right? No, my horse.
Oh, Tommy.
And I actually have a new horse as of last year. His name is Winfield.
Ooh,
Very
and-
sophisticated.
Yes, he's very sophisticated, although he would have
she?
he's a slow learner, let's say, and a little stubborn. So we're dealing with the toddler phase of this, I guess now 5-year-old, but I'm told he's gotten his act together. So I'm excited to go ride him and see, but he's actually got a heart on his forehead.
You got to send us a picture so we can
we
put
can
it
put
on.
up a picture of him.
Oh, I love that.
What inspired the name Winfield?
These were both off-track thoroughbreds. So I did start my career in equine sports medicine and surgery and did some work in the regulatory side on the racetracks as well, as you mentioned. And I just really wanted to make sure I was a part of the solution to rehoming, retraining these wonderful animals. And I will say off-track thoroughbreds are amazing because they've already seen all of the scary things. I decided to take Tommy to a parade a few years ago, and we pull him off the trailer. We're running late. He's got 4 shoes on. It's pavement. Out of some barn comes a marching band. A golf cart goes whizzing by the other way, and all he did was puff out his chest and was like, "Cool, I'm back at the racetrack." And I thought,
But the ears went up. Yeah.
So where are you in Ohio?
I'm in Indiana.
So which racetracks were you in? Indiana racetracks or all over the country?
I started my career in standardbred racing and as a private practitioner, and I was licensed in Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and Ohio.
Wow.
Years and years and years ago.
Sure.
And then I was the former equine medical director for the Indiana Horse Racing Commission. And there's 2 racetracks in Indiana, one racing thoroughbreds and quarter horses and the other races standardbreds.
Did you know
Angela, will you tell Janet what a regulatory vet does at the track? Because I know you don't know, Janet.
I'm sure they have to make sure that all the processes, it's like standard operating procedures.
Yep. So we actually drug test the horses after the race.
Good.
Not 100%, but the winners and then a random sampling of the others. And then also there are regulatory veterinarians there on race day to ensure, like, as the horses warm up, they're sound, they're not lame, no overt concerns about them being in that race to keep the sport as safe as possible.
Is that
It's
a
a
urine
big
test?
deal, Janet.
Wait,
It
is that a
really
urine
is.
test for drugs for those horses? I'm just curious.
Blood and urine.
Wow.
I have to tell you one of my favorite vet school stories. Actually, to be honest, except for graduation, it's up there, tied for my favorite vet school experience. I'm in the barn one night. We used to bring apples and carrots to the horses that you practice drawing blood on, because we felt bad. They were donated horses. All that. So it was me and Darla and a couple other people, and it was like our first or second year. And it was winter because I took equine in the winter because it was less busy. See, there's a method to my madness. And the barn door bell goes off. And I'm looking around. Nobody's around. The residents were, God only knows where they were. So I go to the door, and it's the Budweiser Clydesdales. And they're 3 semis. They had just filmed their commercial in Vermont, and they needed a big place to stay on their way back to St. Louis.
And they didn't make a
And
reservation.
They probably did, but we were a low-life student. We didn't know anything. And so the guys, they were like, "Hey, girls, me and Darla, where's a good place to eat?" And we're like, we're getting pictures. And that's when we had the little Kodak Instamatics. We ran to our lockers. We're running. We're like, "The Clydesdales are here. The Clydesdales are here." And so anyway, it was one of the best years. So I got my picture taken with one of them, Dave. Dave's nose, when I stood up, the nose came to here.
Yeah.
And then it was Bud and Miss Bud were the Dalmatians. We pitched a stall for them. It was just, oh,
But the Dalmatians were a little plump,
yeah, they were a little bit.
because they get
A lot
fed
of
all the time.
treats.
I'm
But
sure.
Angela,
I'm sure.
Did you have anything to do with the draft horses? Are just, oh my God, so amazing.
They're majestic.
I worked on very few draft horses in my career, but I will say that I knew I was going to start my career in equine probably when my mom and dad tell the story of when we were little. They took us to St. Louis to see the Budweiser Clydesdales, and somebody had, I guess there was either just like there wasn't a full gate maybe in front of the stall or something. And, it was enough to keep the Clydesdale in, but not enough to keep a kid out. And the next thing you know, I'm in there with the horse.
That big horse.
Yeah, I just
My
snuck through, 5, 6,
Tugging
7,
its
8 years
leg.
old. And just, whatever I was doing. And my parents, big eyes and like yanked me out of there before we got kicked out of the place, I think.
So you grew up with horses then?
No, I just
No?
always
Yeah.
wanted to.
Oh,
Angela, do you have any small animals? Any dogs or cats?
yeah.
Yes. So I've got a husky named Dakota, and she is about to turn 15 years old.
Oh my God, God bless her.
And I've got 2 cats, Pearl and Henry. They're 2 and 3 years old.
So I imagine you're probably drawing blood work and ultrasounding your 15-year-old
Dakota.
like I did with mine. Like I was crazy, trying to pick up anything early that I could pick up.
Well, she was a bit of a rescue, and I got her because she had heartworm disease and pyometra, and the owner relinquished her. So my friend treated her, and I ended up with her, and she's been a great dog. I was so grateful to adopt her. And then she had some gastrointestinal issues. She's had some issues kind of going on. And so we're kind of in the medically managing versus crazy diagnostic phase at this point. And
Yeah.
just kind of keeping her happy and healthy.
Yeah. I hear you. I think I would almost hate to be a veterinarian's pet. There's 2 reasons. One, because like we can do anything that we want as far as testing. But I remember one time in vet school, there was a test, multiple choice, of course, Angela, we're good at that. Asking, you're the vet and it's your pet and he was exposed to a rabid animal. What do you do next? Because the whole question was, of course you didn't give your own pets vaccines because you're busy doing everybody else. And I remember I was horrified. Oh, it didn't get a vaccine and you're the vet. But that's how it goes. The cobbler's kids wear no shoes. Seriously. Now there's soothing relief for your pet's irritated skin from allergic response, contact allergens, and insect bites. Atopicreme HC by Vetramax is a unique anti-inflammatory, rehydrating leave-on lotion conditioner for animals that is quickly absorbed, providing sustained benefits while leaving no residue. Fortified with ceramides, these lipids help restore the skin's natural protective barrier and aid in healthy skin regeneration for your pet. Atopicreme HC is made in the USA and not only provides quick relief for irritated skin, but it's also an aid in detangling your animal's coat. Ask your distributor about Vetramax products. Vetramax makes it better.
Blue Buffalo Natural Veterinary Diets offer a natural alternative in nutritional therapy. With their in-house research and development team with over 300 years experience in well pet and veterinary therapeutic diets, more than 600 scientific publications, and more than 50 U.S. patents. Blue Buffalo Natural Veterinary Diets.
So anyway, getting back to bird flu, because there we are, Janet.
I
You
know,
allowed
off
me to
topic.
digress and talk vet.
Guilty.
Vet to vet. But so far, I read one human in Louisiana passed away from bird flu, but they said she had other comorbidities. Is that what you heard, Angela?
And I can't remember. There was one case of a human passing away, but also I think was elderly, was in, had other issues, had other diseases, like you said.
Wonder if she had a cat.
I do not know. I don't know if it was, I don't know that it was related to anything like
Yeah.
that. But again, I want to say I saw that on either one of the USDA websites or CDC or FDA. And I'll be honest, I mean, you can look at these websites every day and they're updating them pretty regularly. And, you know, there are several different websites with great information from those three resources. So, you know, as I was preparing for this podcast, you know, I've read all this information and then kind of a little, you know, went on to the next thing and the next question and, you know, what's the next question? And so sometimes I think you can get a little bit down into that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
But I did
Keep
find
clicking.
on the CDC website,
Yeah.
they do have a current situation. And so they do monitor for avian influenza in people. And it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 states that have reported human cases.
Oh.
And, you know, again, the risk to humans is pretty low.
Okay, good.
And there's a lot of really great information on
the
the
site.
CDC's website. And part of my hesitation for going too in depth with this information is because, you know, as podcasts are out in the world, it might actually be better for people to say, oh, I know I need to go check that CDC website and get the
Right.
up-to-date information. Only because I know how potentially rapidly things might be changing as we, you know, come out of the winter and as the migratory birds are moving and, you know, different states kind of get hit with this virus at different times. And sometimes early in the year, like February to April, when I was looking through the data, looked like a time period when, you know, of course, you're going to have a lot of migratory bird movement, other things like that. So just a kind of a long-winded way of saying this could potentially change here in the next 3 to 4 months. It's also possible that as we get better controls in place with those raw diets, that we're actually going to see less and less of these transmissions to our pet cats and dogs and things like that, because there is that awareness, and those pet food manufacturers will start to put safeguards in place now that this has happened. So we may actually, we never know if it's going to get worse before it gets better, or if we caught it early enough that we can put the safeguards in place and therefore things are moving forward pretty rapidly as well.
Okay, this might be a crazy question. It's all over the world. It's not just in the United States, right? It's worldwide cases. Okay, just making sure. Well, this is like so informative. First of all, you said it's called H5N1. So I'm assuming that when one of these viruses is discovered, it gets this kind of name. Like it was COVID-19, and then it's evolved to all these different. So here's a crazy question: who picks that out?
Well, there's viral terminology. And so the, you know, different influenzas are designated by the H and the N designation. So COVID is a coronavirus. And so lots of the different coronaviruses are named by different, you know, we had the SARS and the MERS and COVID and with that coronavirus type designation. And then when we have influenza, it's usually H something, N something. And that's how they designate what type of influenza virus it is. And, you know, the ones we vaccinate our dogs for are, I haven't looked at those
I can't
vaccines in the
remember
last
them.
couple of months, but
I have no
I want to
idea.
say it's like, as soon as I say it, someone's going to say, you're wrong, so I better just not guess at those.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
numbers.
I can't even remember this one, H5N1. I had to write it down because it's like you hear so many different permutations of. I'm curious is IDEX or Antec, are they readily testing for it? Like if someone would take their cat in, you know, I guess I could look it up on their website.
I haven't, I'll be honest with you, I haven't checked either IDEX or Antec's catalog, but I will say your state veterinarian's office is really going to be the one to call. Or if you've got a college of veterinary medicine, I would call their animal disease and diagnostic lab for those veterinarians who are out there. those are going to be the places to call to see where you can send samples. Again, if it's highly pathogenic, there may need to be additional safeguards in place for any laboratory that's handling those samples. So if you suspect that it is indeed a, for pet owners, if you are seeing some neurologic signs, seeing some respiratory signs, oh, I fed a raw diet, is some possibility here that this is what we're dealing with. Before you go to the veterinarian, call them and let them know, because they're going to want to put additional safeguards in their hospital and for their staff to make sure that everybody stays safe and all the other animals that are hospitalized that day or there for appointments are not put at risk. And then for the same way, the sample collection and sending, there may be some other safeguards and requirements and levels, biosafety laboratory protocols for handling of these samples. And then quite frankly, just our regular laboratories that process the usual blood may not be yet capable of doing that test. So I don't know which it is, to be honest with you, or perhaps they do have the capability. But again, call in advance, ask those questions. But again, I think for the most up-to-date information I saw was to alert your state veterinarian, and then they'll know if you need to talk to the public health department or kind of what those next steps are and what samples you need to take and where you can send those samples as well.
So what happens, but wait, what happens if your cat gets it? We didn't talk about this. Are they treated? Do they pass away? Is it curable?
It would be supportive care. So if, depending on how early it's caught, how severe the clinical signs are, it's like any other disease. As far as, if it's very infectious very quickly and they get very sick very quickly, and they're showing severe neurologic symptoms, I think that's going to be a worse outcome and prognosis than if we're just coughing a little bit,
right?
Or, just need a little bit of supportive care. And I'm not sure if our typical antivirals how effective they would be. I haven't heard that information yet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm wondering about? I'm wondering, as a veterinarian, in general practice veterinarian, if they have an outdoor cat and then they find a dead bird in the yard, like should they call the local health department and say, hey, listen, I think my cat killed this bird. Do you need to see the body? Or you see what I mean, Angela? If it's kind of like when you find a dead bat.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to depend on what area of the country you are in and what are the current recommendations. If it was a healthy animal that your cat accidentally captured, maybe not, because it was healthy beforehand. But if it, wasn't acting right, other kinds of things like that. Same with any wildlife or wild animal that's really not acting right. Keep your cats indoors. That's another recommendation. The Feline Veterinary Medical Association, does recommend, I believe, that you keep your cats indoors, both to protect the wildlife population and also to protect them. So, that's another thing to keep in mind, that if you're in an area where they're seeing a lot of avian influenza, that although there might be some other challenges with those cats that like to go outside when they're not allowed anymore, I understand that too. Sometimes it is very difficult balancing act on keeping everybody safe and also keeping them environmentally stimulated so that they're not causing other behavioral issues in the cats. And so there are some
peeing in the house. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that was, I guess I should have just come right out and said it.
I knew you were getting at that.
So we don't want our favorite chair scratched up as a new scratching post. We don't want urine everywhere. It's not supposed to be. But there are a lot of really great resources for environmental stimulation in cats. I think Ohio might have a feline indoor initiative with environmental enrichment. I know I tell my clients a lot. Catamazing.com is some really cool puzzle boxes for cats that keep them busy for a while. And there's some other really great resources from the Feline VMA on how to keep your cats entertained and out of trouble.
I have an app on my iPad. It's like a
Oh.
fishing pond.
You got Cat
Do they
TV.
watch it?
Oh my God, it's fabulous. Atticus goes nuts. Wait a minute, I'll pull it out.
Do they paw at the screen though?
Oh yeah, and you have to. I don't know if I still have it. You have.
You know,
to,
my friend who passed away, Becky, she had she used to, when we had VCRs, she plugged in one where someone was making can opener sounds, and then they had birds coming into out of the nest, and the cats would literally line up on the bench in front of the TV. It was the cutest thing.
I don't think I have it anymore. It was during COVID. They were making us crazy and we got it, and it's like fish in water, and you can make it go like blue 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 blue, and the cat would be all day long, and it would score points. But the cat didn't know that. I knew that.
And when they're done playing the game, give them a treat they can capture on that screen, because it does build a ton of frustration when they're hunting, and they can't capture that prey. So, you know, if you're playing with one of those toys with the stick and the little, stuffed animal at the end, when you're done playing and they capture it, let go and let them take it off. But watch them, make sure they don't eat a string or a feather or anything. But then when they're done with it, take it back and hide it for the next time. But they get really frustrated and they have no outlet for that frustration. And then we get other behavioral issues. So, or the laser pointers, like make sure there's a treat at the end that's on that light that they can capture when you're done.
Okay, wait, it's called Catfishing by Purina.
Oh,
That's really cute.
And I'm telling you, it was tons of fun because
that makes such sense.
see, look, it looks like a fish pond.
Don't get them all stimulated
the
and then
points?
just let them hanging, you know, because then they'll really do some destruction.
And you can change like the colors of the fish. I'm telling you, it kept me sane.
I love that. That's great.
So, Angela, this is what JQ Public is doing with their cats. We just found out they're doing fish apps. Good to know, Janet.
That's
I did not know
Friskies.
that.
It's free from Friskies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you can add new cat, like each cat can have a score.
Oh,
Wow.
It's really cute.
I'm going to look it up, seriously.
There's a lot
the
of cat
thing is-
TV out there. Yeah.
We have to put all that information so people like the FDA.gov and all that on there.
we will.
So people can find out more information. I did see Cleveland Clinic has information on their website for people if you think you've been exposed or what the symptoms are, and I'm sure they're getting a lot of calls too. Not only for humans but for cats. But what's so sad about this is they've probably had to kill entire flocks of chickens, right, Angela? If it gets into one, like an egg-producing farm, no?
Sometimes, unfortunately, those types of things also have to happen. But again, all that information will be up on the USDA's website with any of the large-scale outbreaks that have required containment, control, and unfortunately depopulation. And I will say the AVMA has a lot of great resources for cat owners and the public on what clinical signs to watch for, which we talked about here today.
Right.
And some other basic information that we covered.
And as far as chicken, for us, people that eat chicken, as long as they cook it thoroughly as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if we're, if the FDA is putting out a statement saying, look, we know that the virus is inactivated if you cook the meat first, then, same thing with Salmonella, Campylobacter, influenza virus. If we're cooking the meat, then it would be safe to eat. Also, any flock, typically I would say, anytime animals get sick, they do get quarantined and should not enter our food supply. Okay. If we do end up with recalls, that would be the exception to that process. But there's some pretty strict, usually quarantine testing protocols, procedures. Sick animals do not get put into the food supply chain. they're separated and made sure that, we're not, eating sick animals, right? So we're not putting ourselves or our family or our pets at risk.
Boy, I'll tell you, there is so much to food biosecurity. I don't think people appreciate that. Really, there is. When you think about it, the African swine fever, and I know we're not talking about that today, but I keep reading about that and how if that gets into this country, I mean, it could wipe out, it can survive in leather and everything like that. So food biosecurity is really a big deal. I mean, I don't think people give the respect that it's like water treatment plants. Same thing. You know what I mean? You've got to have that biosecurity.
Yeah. No,
This has
absolutely.
been really informative and fascinating. And we'll be sure, don't forget to email us a picture of your horses.
Oh, I want to see Tommy
I
with
want
the
to see that.
heart.
We'll put the pictures up. But this has been really,
heart.
thank you for the good work that you do. We really appreciate it. And this is really informative. Now we all know what a raw diet is. See? Dumb question gets a good answer.
Was not a dumb question. I mean, it isn't, you're not cooking it. So I think that's, a very important distinction. And, when, people like me and Alice are asked these questions who've, been involved with some of these processes at a really deep level our whole careers, like sometimes we forget
Yeah.
how we're speaking and what language we need to be using and what needs to be clarified. So it's hard to know sometimes what needs to be clarified and how we can communicate more effectively. So I really appreciate your questions.
Angela, I'm going to ask you the questions we ask all our guests. What is
Okay.
your pet or human peeve?
My pet or
Human
human?
peeve.
And we purposely didn't pre-ask this question
Yeah.
so that you would do what's at the top of your head.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, time's up. Okay, anyway, just kidding.
No, it isn't.
That is such a great question. I'm really drawing a blank. This is probably your pet peeve is when people aren't prepared.
Yeah, we're not here to coach our guests.
When we're thinking about having those interactions in an exam room or really trying to help a pet, I think really understanding where people are coming from is important and like really understanding kind of connecting on some basic level, like what are your goals with your pets? What is, the outcome? What are the concerns? Are there budgetary constraints?
Right.
There's only so many questions we can ask. So I would say for clients to be, the more upfront and clear communicating they can be with their veterinarian, the more that the veterinarian can help say, okay, these are the most important tests and these are the most important treatments. And so, we're not doing a bunch of diagnostics and then we're out of budget to actually treat the pet or just to be able to have those really meaningful and trusting conversations. And they can be really hard conversations sometimes. And so, I always try to approach everybody and everything with some empathy and respect. And so I think that's why it's a little hard for me to answer that question sometimes.
That was a good answer,
because, we're all different and we're all doing our best and we're all coming at things from a different perspective. And I think having a little understanding and empathy towards that can go a long way.
I love that answer because I think in vet school, I think we're taught that here's the disease, this is how it's treated. No, let's talk what's right for this patient, what's right for this owner, financially, emotionally. And I got into vet school at an older age, and so I had a different profession before this. And to me, every pet and every owner was a unique individual. I can't stand the factory mentality, and I'm hoping that vet schools now are saying, okay, if we can't treat this way, what are the other options for this pet parent? And Angela, it sounds like you and I had similar goals in practice because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. It might not be right for that particular situation.
Well, I also think you guys as vets, the patient can't explain what's going on. Right? So you're missing that part of the puzzle. So I think it's really hard to be observant of the pet, but then you have to listen to the owner and consider all those other factors like affordability,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think that's the hardest part to me, being to be a vet. I that would be really frustrating. Like sometimes I'll just hold the cat and go, "What is wrong with you?" And they go, "Rah," it's a great conversation.
I know. I'm so proud of our profession because of that. I think it's a very emotional profession. We're the number one suicide rate for medical professionals. And I totally get that. I totally understand that. And I will say that to somebody and they'll say, really? Because it used to be dentists.
Yes.
And I would always I would always kid my dentist about that. I'm like, what's so hard about this? You're always going playing golf or something, But now it's us, and I've often said, like with your dog, 15 years old, you're seeing this 15-year-old that you've been seeing for 15 years, and the next room is a 6-week-old puppy, and you're crying in this room, and the next 6-week-old puppy doesn't want to hear what you just had to do in that 15-year-old. So your emotions are like this, and I just have such an admiration for our profession. I still can't believe I'm a vet. I still am like this to every vet I meet. Like you being, your profession being in the armed forces. I admire that so much. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has just been amazing. And don't worry, we our editors, our producers are amazing at editing. So
they'll edit out all my long-winded stories because they're sick of the Budweiser Clydesdale story.
Heard it all. I just sent Joanna.
But I love it.
I just sent those pictures of the Budweisers.
I know. I just got them.
Because we saw them in Florida once. We drove.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Nerds. Yeah.
Janet.
Yes.
Now you know what to watch for in those cats because you've got big hunter cats.
I have big. Don't tell anybody. They're outdoor cats. But they're in today because it's 8 degrees. So don't worry. They're safe.
Glad to hear it.
But anyway, Janet, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, Angela. I hope we get to meet in person someday so I can riddle you with more questions and ask you all the good restaurants, from the public health aspect.
The county public health departments publish that information, so
That's true.
Ours does, yeah.
Anyway, I'm Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroen from Cleveland, Ohio, and
I'm Janet Novotny King, also born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. We're the Novotny sisters, saying thank you, Dr. Demaree, for joining us today. We truly appreciate you serving our country and the good work that you do with pets. Thank you so much.
thank you
and
so
wind
much.
it up for now. So kiss your pets for us, and until next time, we'll see ya.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you learned some valuable information about making decisions about your pet's health.
And don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe on podcasts, because we love to have those likes. Thanks so much for listening.
That's actually really good. You could both go bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
How about woof woof?
Speaking of Pets podcast has been sponsored by Vetramax Solvacare Gel, the industry-leading treatment for idiopathic hyperkeratosis. Available from your vet or visit Chewy.com to save 15% with promo code Vetramax15 at checkout. Vetramax makes it better. And Blue Buffalo Veterinary Diets. Love them like family, feed them like family.
Follow us on social at Speaking of Pets and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
The Speaking of Pets podcast is an SLA video production.